Justin, thank you so much for your efforts on this issue. And it is, I mean, it's just amazing to consider how long this has been happening, how taxpayers have been unaware of what they've been funding. And really, ultimately, when you look at the results, there's no good reason to justify why this is taking place at all whatsoever. And I was reading a letter that a member of Congress had sent to Dr. Fauci and NIAID asking, why are these experiments, why is this still happening, especially considering that, you know, the FDA has already said that there's no reason to do this type of experimentation on dogs, period. There's no reason to do this, and yet we are. You guys were really, I think, credited for breaking this story. Tell us about this, and has anything since this has come to light, has anything been done to at least have a cease and desist on what they're doing?
So thanks, first of all, for having me. This is such an important issue, and I really appreciate the platform. We exposed these experiments using the Freedom of Information Act. Horrific abuses of dogs. I know you don't want to hear too much about it. It's upsetting. But I think people need to know that they've been spending.
I agree.
Yeah. People need to know that their tax dollars, millions of their tax dollars, have been spent to torture dogs in horrific ways, including infesting with flies, infesting with ticks, cutting out their vocal cords so they can't bark in the laboratory, force feeding them experimental drugs. And then just today in the Daily Caller, we exposed a project where they're using beagle dogs basically as heartworm factories for other experiments, where they're infecting dogs intentionally with heartworms and then killing the dogs, cutting out the worms and experimenting on the worms. It's sickening. Majority of taxpayers, Democrats and Republicans alike, don't want to pay for this. Yet Fauci has gotten off the hook for years funding this type of waste and abuse. But thankfully, we have members of Congress like Congresswoman Nancy Mace from South Carolina, and Senator Rand Paul just sent a letter last week demanding answers about this. And Nancy Mace and other Republican colleagues are now also calling for hearings on taxpayer-funded animal experimentation, particularly on dogs, to find out from Fauci and others why the hell we're paying for this.
Exactly, because in some areas, in some parts of the country, this behavior, if not in the name of science, this is a felony.
That's absolutely right. What they're doing in laboratories to dogs would be illegal if it happened anywhere else. That's absolutely right. These people would be locked up, and they should be anyway.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I hope that maybe after, if they can their efforts to get this to end are successful, I hope that maybe they can have hearings about bringing criminal charges up against the people who have been engaged in this for so long. The thing that really, and I think that Representative Mace, to your point, I think that she had mentioned this in her letter, and I know that you all have discussed this on your website at White Coast Waste Project, on the website there. The purpose for doing this experimentation isn't actually even, it's not even needed. It's not necessary, because from everything that your group has shared, and from some of the points that members of Congress have made and other animal activists have made also, is that this isn't needed. They already have the information that is required in order to continue doing what they're doing without continued animal testing. But yet, we're still seeing a significant number of dogs exposed to this, and then they just kill the dogs right after. Talk to us a little bit about this, because why are they still doing this if it's not needed? And the FDA even says it's not needed.
There's a stunning lack of transparency and accountability about how tax dollars are being spent, Dana. The NIH alone spends about $20 billion a year, billion with a B, $20 billion a year on animal testing, on dogs, on cats, on primates, on other animals, while at the same time admitting on its website and constantly lamenting here and there how animal experimentation is incredibly wasteful. On the NIH's website, they admit that 9 out of 10 drugs that pass animal tests fail in humans because they don't work or they're dangerous. And we know that animal experimentations rarely lead to any breakthroughs to improve human health. Any successes are the exception, not the rule. And we believe taxpayers shouldn't be forced to pay for this, not only wasteful experimentation, but incredibly barbaric experimentation. Animal experimentation is 2,000 years old. We're so advanced now in the 21st century. This is not how we should be doing science, and lots of scientists agree with that. Yet you have people like Anthony Fauci who've been doing this for, experimenting on animals for 40 years. I mean, he was the godfather of chimpanzee experimentation in the U.S. I mean, he was infecting chimps with HIV in the 80s, and soon learned that, guess what? Chimps don't get sick from HIV. Chimps don't get AIDS. It's incredibly wasteful. And he ended up having thousands of chimps experimented on because they were just sitting around in labs because of his failed program. So this is a legacy of waste and abuse that Anthony Fauci has ushered in, and it needs to end.
And he should be sitting in a jail cell instead of wearing a white coat and being in a lab, because this is like serial killer witch doctor stuff. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I mean, I get enraged over stuff like this, and I'm like, if people are going to riot, here's something that you can get out and riot about, because this is awful. I mean, and it's been happening for so long. It's been going for so long. And that this is just coming to light. And I know that your group's hard efforts to make sure that people are aware of this, I'm sure it has to be incredibly frustrating to know that, to have it take so long to break through. And sadly, I'm one of those people that didn't even realize $20 billion a year, and that this level of and this kind of experimentation is still taking place. Like you, I'm like, oh, well, we're advanced as people. I mean, I don't even use anything in my home that's tested on animals. I mean, when my kids were going to college, we do not even look at any universities that incorporate it as part of any kind of science or anything else there. And the fact that, we're still doing this, and taxpayer money is still being used to this extent, and only now people are becoming aware of it. I mean, I know it has to be heartbreaking and infuriating for you and the people that work with you.
It is, but where we're making progress, and this is another example of Anthony Fauci being out of step with science, honestly, because you have other agencies like the FDA, like the EPA, like the USDA, under the Trump administration, who made great strides, actually, to start moving away from animal testing, particularly with cats and dogs. At the EPA, for example, they've pledged to end all animal testing over the next decade or so. So there's a lot of progress being made at other agencies. The NIH stands alone as an agency that's not making an effort at all, really, to end animal experimentation. They're constantly doubling down on it. Instead of looking for better ways to do science that are more efficient for taxpayers and less cruel, they're putting up press releases and statements on their website defending it. But this is not unlike the situation in Wuhan. I mean, that's another example of animal experimentation gone wrong that Anthony Fauci has given full-throated support for, and it may have caused a pandemic that's killed millions of people, and he's still defending it today.
And it makes the case, too, for that this was, what they were doing there and the level of testing and experimentation in animals involved. It's biowarfare. I mean, they're essentially creating biowarfare in labs using animals horrifically. And he's, he not only does he know this, but he's, directing grant money to this. So tell me, Justin, what can people do to put pressure on elected officials to make sure that we do more than send letters and even do more than hold hearings? Because hearings are fine, but there needs to be action and not just like, the parade and the pageantry.
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing people can do is visit dogsagainstfauci.org, which is a website we have set up where they can write directly to their members of Congress and ask them to take action on this issue specifically. Urge your members of Congress to defund Anthony Fauci. This is the problem, is that he has the funding and he's allowed to use it however he wants. We want them to defund Anthony Fauci's dog experiments, cut the funding off. When the money stops, the killing stops. I also urge people to call the Capitol switchboard, ask for your members of Congress, and ask for the same thing. Tell them as a constituent, this is not how you want your tax dollars to be spent. And if you want to stay updated on these campaigns, again, we're releasing new information about this every few days. You can visit whitecoatwaste.org or at whitecoatwaste on all social media platforms. We're constantly posting all day long. We just released an expose today about these heartworm experiments on dogs, and there's more to come.